Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for taking time out of your very busy diaries, I'm sure, to join us for this PPMA webinar today. So I'm Marie Metham, and I'm a strategic HR business partner at Lincolnshire County Council, and I'm also a member of the PPMA Extended Management Board. So I'm your host for the webinar this afternoon. Now, you'll probably be aware this is one of a series of webinars that PPMA bring you on a variety of thought-provoking, interesting topics from a large variety of speakers. So today we're delighted to be joined by Kevin Keedy and Michael Wikotoko from Hackney Council, and they're going to be talking to us about their groundbreaking insourcing journey, looking at how Hackney's parking services transitioned its enforcement service in-house, focusing on customer service and safety. So just a couple of housekeeping things before we start. The session is being recorded, just to make you aware of that. And that's just for anybody who can't join us today. They'll be able to watch it on catch up on the PPMA website. Don't worry though, only the presenter and myself when I'm speaking will be visible on the recording. So do feel free to keep your camera on if you'd like to. And can I ask that you just turn your microphone off during the presentation, but there will be opportunity for questions at the end, or if you wish to, you could put them in the chat as we're going through if you prefer. So I'm really looking forward to today's session. So Kevin and Michael, over to you.
Thanks very much, Marie. And again, I'd like to echo what you just said there about really looking forward to today's webinar and giving us the opportunity to showcase some of the things that we've been doing in our very glamorous world of parking services, which I say tongue-in-cheek. It's not particularly glamorous, but it's extremely important. And we're going to kick off now and just talk you through. So on the title of this presentation, you can see they said it couldn't be done. And the reason why I put that on there is because when we decided to go down this route of looking at bringing parking enforcement in-house, there are many people within the organisation, I'm sure this is true of other local authorities, that would respond with, why would you want to do this? And actually, what makes you think you could do it? And there were certainly some of the comments that I had. When I joined Hackney Council in 2015, my predecessor, when I asked him, I joined prior to working for Hackney Council. I worked in the banking industry for the Royal Bank of Scotland, so I had a bit of a career change. And one of my naive questions when I joined is, why are we outsourcing this? And what stuck with me to this very day is, you don't understand, this is how public sector works, Kevin. We pay these people to take these problems away from us, which I found quite alarming and rather insightful. And certainly I had a similar experience when we were presenting our business case to our Cabinet Procurement and Insourcing Committee when we were putting forward proposals to bring this in-house, which I'll come on to in a second, but we'll just move through these slides. So I'm joined today by Michael Wikotoko, who's Service Area Manager for Parking Enforcement, who's just been promoted, in fact, to the Senior Service Area Manager for Parking Customer Services. So congratulations. Part of this success has been helping me with this project indeed. So first, a little bit of history and context. That's Hackney's glorious Art Deco town hall there. So in 1999, parking services were outsourced for the first time. So the council was looking for savings, etc. What happened in 1999 led to the council being the label of the first council to receive a Section 114 notice, which is obviously not a great thing. And at that point in time, again, this is before my time, lots of measures were taken to bring Hackney back under control, as it were, particularly from a financial perspective. And part of that was to go ahead with an outsourcing model and contract out parking enforcement to the private sector, which was the case until 2012, then when there was a new contract, but it continued with an outsourcing model. Then it extended for another 5 years. And so for example, some of the measures that we look at around that period of time is the performance of average PCNs. So you can see 106, and it moved to 109, 101 in 2017, 18, 19, and it dropped down to 94. So we started to see a bit of a decline. In terms of quality measures that we have with what we do in parking, we were 4th in London, 9th in London, 18th in London, and 23rd in London. So you can see over time with the contract, the performance was declining and the quality was declining too. The cost of the contract, 4.3 million back in 2015-16, started to rise to 4.6, and then it jumped to 5.8, and then 5.7 in 2018, 2019, which led to some questions, i.e., are we getting value for money? So in terms of some of the other issues that we had, staff were paid very low. The London living wage, and not a penny more, was what the contractor was paying. They're unhappy workforce for a variety of reasons. The culture is really quite poor. Poor conditions for colleagues, and they were treated quite poorly. So, for example, colleagues in the enforcement team were not referred to by the contractor managers by name, but by badge number, which I think you'll agree is not a great way to demonstrate that they're valued in any way. They're really quite unhappy. Management were quite disorganized. So, for example, there weren't any advanced rotas. You basically phoned up the supervisor over a weekend and found out what your working pattern was for the next week, and that was it. Officers were expected to go out in all weathers and were not provided wet weather gear. So you can imagine enforcement officers going out, checking on cars that are contravened and paid, and when it was pouring down with rain, they're expected to buy their own wet weather gear. So it wasn't a great place to work if you're one of those guys. They were not treated well at all. So the impact of that, which led to strikes, which probably come as no surprise. So as you can see, there's some of the reports at the time, traffic wardens not being treated unfairly, and so on and so forth. So this is the environment in which we're working, which I was operating with this contract. So again, we weren't getting very good value for money. We had a very unhappy workforce. Performance was poor, and reputation was quite damaging to the organisation. And they keep going on. Strikes, and strikes. So we had quite a high turnover of staff, as you probably wouldn't come as a surprise to you. As this chart demonstrates, 2017 there, and 2018-19, the numbers that are leaving. So 24.7% of the workforce in 2017-18, 31% in the following year. That's not loading at the moment. Sorry about that. Skip to the next one. So when we presented the case to our cabinet procurement and insourcing committee, part of that was to build a business case that got through the checks and balances through our corporate finance colleagues. And the group director at that time was quoted as saying, "What makes you think you can do parking enforcement better than a specialist contractor?" The assumption being that, going back to when we had the Section 114 notice and it was decided to go out to contractors, that the organisation just did not have the ability, were not equipped, didn't have the competence, didn't have the skills, the knowledge, experience to operate this sort of service, and therefore going out to contractor specialists was the right thing to do at that time. But the point is that 20 years later, we're in a different place. And the other important point to answer this question was that the way physically we operate as a parking service is not just about the enforcement. The enforcement is a very important part of it, but there's the policy side, there's the maintenance side, there's the permit side, there's the customer service side there, and of course the appeals and debt recovery side, which so there are different slices to the whole pizza in parking, as it were. It's not just about the enforcement. So as a whole team, we all are located in the same building, and in that building we rub shoulders and we observe day in, day out what the enforcement team are doing under the contract. So the contractors are essentially embedded in the same workplace as us. So over that 20-year period, all of us in parking, observed and understood exactly how our contractor was managing and performing. So that gave us the confidence to state we can absolutely do a better job and answer that question. And the other thing that allowed us to give our corporate finance colleagues confidence is that prior to this particular reorganisation, we carried out a reorganisation in the markets team some 3 years prior. And in essence, what that did is at that time, that market service was costing this council £1.1 million a year. It was not generating enough to break even by any means, and it was impacting the general fund. So my reorganisation of the markets team led to breaking even, coming out of that deficit, and going up and using a completely different approach. In other words, not seeking traditionally markets officers that have local authority experience, licensing experience, and so on, and just copy and pasting the same sort of, doing the same thing, expecting different results. Instead, we moved to more commercial operation, a more service-driven operation, which identified people that had the right behaviours around customer service and so on. So we deliberately sought out managers and staff that were interested to coming to work for an organisation and bring skills with them from maybe a hospitality or retail background. And that is what unlocked the success, changed the culture of the team. And that allowed me to argue successfully with our corporate colleagues, corporate finance colleagues, that actually I could probably do it just as well, if not better, than Abcoa, our contractor, were doing it at the time. So that led to this setting of a compelling vision of the future, which I think you'll all agree is a good thing to have, which is we set our stall out around we'll be the best performing parking enforcement team in London, if not the UK. And we are, we continue to be. So in terms of quality, productivity, value for money, and the best culture. So we have service promises that, again, as I mentioned, I cover markets as well as parking. And it's important to me, the culture is set out in terms of the behaviours that I expect to see from people in the team, particularly managers and leaders. But they're underpinned by these 3 service promises that we have. They started life as guiding principles, but guiding principles is a little bit too managementy, and I prefer to simplify the language. And the term service promise carries much more weight than a guiding principle. I think you'll agree. So these things, as you can see on this screen, are: number 1, provide fair outcomes for customers, get things done right first time, and simplify and continually improve our processes. So culture change for us began with colleague engagement. We asked, if the screen will speed up a little bit, that'd be helpful. We asked what we should stop, start, and continue. And we worked in very close collaboration with Unite, Unison, and G&B, particularly Unite. So the culture change that we went about, because it wasn't just about saving money for the council, it's about changing the culture. So we had a much more happy, productive workforce. But we set out at the very beginning deliberately to have a proper, meaningful engagement with union colleagues. To that point, we set up a structure whereby we'd meet with unions every month without fail, every period of about 2 years, alongside our HR business partners. And in that group, it's quite informal, very transparent, very open, very honest. And my objective with that one, we had shared objectives essentially here, but there are quite a lot of barriers to break down in the beginning. Remember, we're moving from a situation where these parking colleagues under the contract, there were many, many disputes, and there was lots of industrial action. So as we're on this journey to bring them over into Hackney Council, there's quite a lot of work to do to build up trust and understanding between us both, in that, you know, it wasn't simply a case of a change of management. There was going to be a significant shift in culture change, and part of that was, or a very key part of that was ensuring that the colleagues were engaged with us on that journey from day one. So we held a series of workshops, which we invited all of the officers. At this point, they were still working for that contract, but the contract hadn't quite ended, although we had announced that we were no longer going to go out for tender, we're going to bring it in-house. So we brought our colleagues into workshops, and we started to ask them questions around what would you like to see change as a result of it coming in-house. That drew out 200 recommendations from staff, which between us, ourselves in the leadership team and union colleagues, worked relentlessly to try and address. Now, within some of those 200 recommendations, there were some things that couldn't be achieved, such as can we only do enforcement when it's not raining, please? So we can understand why that came out, but unfortunately, we're not going to down tools because it's raining outside. We need to deliver the service regardless of the weather. But then it did lead to, well, again, the blocker around why do you not want to, go out when it's raining? And it's because, well, the contract wouldn't issue any wet weather gear, which led to us making an agreement, or making a decision once we bring this in-house, which is the right thing to do, of course. We expect people to go out in all weathers. We should provide them with the appropriate workwear to do that. So that has featured in the changes that we've made. Well, one of the key ones was the 4-day working week. So there's an example of a rota there. So I expect we might get questions at the end, so I won't go into too much detail on this one, but that was a question that came out loud and clear from everybody. And essentially, we got this to work. In the first instance, we thought, hang on a second, we probably can't do this. But when we got into a little bit of detail and started looking at the specifics of it, the first thing we considered was, under the contract, these guys were working a 40-hour week. When they came into Hackney, our Hackney standard working week is 36 hours. So a 4-day working week into 36 hours represents a 9-hour day. Now you might think, well, that's quite a lot. But under the old contract, they were working an 8-hour day. And essentially, as I mentioned before, the request came from overwhelming number of officers in the enforcement team. Why can't we work a 4-day week? So it originated with their request. We looked at a 9-hour model. We basically put it to the union reps, put it to the colleagues as well, before we got to the formal consultation, because it featured in the formal consultation as well, which is, if we were to go down this route of doing a 4-day working week, you'd have to work 9 hours instead of 8. How does that sound? And without exception, every single person came back to say that's exactly what we want to do, because it releases more free time to spend with friends and family. And actually, it's quite a tough job, as you can probably imagine, going out on the street every day wearing a uniform, issuing tickets. It can be quite lonely. You can be threatened quite a lot. They do suffer quite a lot, or had suffered quite a lot of physical abuse and verbal abuse. So that downtime with friends and family is really important. But the other benefit to us from a management or a business or service perspective is that there's a certain amount of downtime. So an officer comes into work and then they need to get changed, get ready, and then go out on the street. And then they need to do the reverse at the end of the day. So the less days they're doing that, the less downtime you have at the top and at the beginning and end of every day. So you get more actual productive time where they're deployed. So although they're coming down to a 36-hour week, they're actually on the street for a greater proportion of that time under a 4-day working week model than if we were to go with a 5-day working week model. And essentially, although it's called a 4-day working week, which in practice what it is, what we were able to do is to utilize policies that were already in place in Hackney around compressed hours. So essentially, in reality, what it is a compressed hour working model that meets both service and individual needs to achieve that 4-day working week pattern, which has been extremely successful. So yeah, a few points there about less travel time and less downtime, etc., etc. So they're more productive on shift. So we also brought in, there were lots of concerns around safety. As you can imagine, officers on street are subject to verbal abuse, particularly, but physical abuse as well. And under the old model, it was a race to the bottom, essentially. You can't target officers. You may or may not know this. You can't target parking officers to go out and hit a particular number of tickets. That's unlawful to do that. Nobody does that in the sector. If you do, you're in big trouble. You're going to lose your job. You're breaking the law. So in terms of managing a contract, in the absence of having targets set, then what's typically done is there's a certain amount of officers deployed to streets across the borough every day. So we agree that with the contractor, and if they achieve the number of deployments, so here's a big list of streets in Hackney. You've deployed officers every day. Can we see that on evidence from the GPS trackers that we use? Yes, we can. Okay, well, you tick that box in your KPI and you're likely to get your performance payment at the end of it. Just because you visit a street doesn't mean you actually carry out any enforcement on the street. And the problem that we had was there is that the actual performance of officers by and large wasn't great. So on a daily basis, they did, which isn't particularly productive. But one of the issues, of course, which led to their mood and the feelings that they were not a happy workforce, is that they were sent out on their own, and there were concerns around their safety. So as part of the workshop was a request to do dual deployment. So one of the biggest mitigations we can take to help protect officers, as you probably can understand, is if they're going out in pairs, they're less likely to face verbal abuse and particularly less likely to be physically assaulted. So here's an example of dual patrol. So, and again, from a productivity point of view, if you've got one officer walking up a street, they need to typically come back and walk down the other side. If you're deploying 2 officers, you start at one point and end at the end, and then you move on to the next street. There's no walking back the other way, of course. So each officer does one side of the street. Okay, so focus penalty charge notices. So what we decided to do in terms of looking at the changes that we wanted to make is to move the role away from a civil enforcement officer and to focus it more on the eyes and ears of Hackney. So these are an ambassadorial role. Yes, okay, their core purpose is to go out and issue tickets where they see people parking when they shouldn't be parking or obstructing and what have you. But also we want them to report on fly tipping or graffiti or anti-social behaviour. We're not asking them to deal with it because there are other services in the council that do that. But there's no bigger team in Hackney apart from the waste crews, but they tend to wind down by lunchtime. So our parking officers are around the borough pretty much from 6 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night. So they're very much the eyes and ears of the council. So we thought it was a good idea to redesign the role, to incorporate some of those ambassadorial aspects, but as well as, very important to me, is when I look at the old contractor JD and then look at what we designed. The contractor JD, was not great. It was quite generic, didn't really specify anything, and made no mention at all about behaviours at all that we wanted to see from officers. So we redesigned that JD that focused on the behaviours that we wanted to see from officers on the street representing Hackney, and also reporting on other things, whether it's vehicle engine idling, giving advice to customers, and various other things that you can see there about reporting on other items. This is a very important piece for those guys that are going out on the street, which is to revise and give them brand new uniforms. So that was pretty much a no-brainer, as well as the pay rates. So in terms of, as I mentioned, you can see from the screen there, they were getting paid no more than the London living wage under the old contract. Now for us, again, as I've mentioned, the staff turnover was really high, sickness was really high, engagement was really low, morale was really low, and performance and productivity was really low. So by redesigning the JDs, we got to a point where we can significantly increase the pay. So we're really proud to say that the pay rate is probably the highest in London for this particular type of role, and it shot up by around 31 or 28% in comparison to this year, which is massive. So all staff received first aid training. Everyone was equipped with body-worn cameras, which does help to deter people from physical abuse, because they know they're being filmed, and verbal abuse as well. And everyone's provided with smartphones, which are equipped to alert other officers in cases of emergency. GPS tracker radios, this is all pretty much standard stuff, and they're all connected to our community safety team. And all staff have received anti-terrorism training and other associated training as well. So it also opened up opportunities for career progression. So this is an example of a young lady that began with the external contractor as a cleaner in February 2018, and she wanted to get on and actually ask, is there any way that I can become an enforcement officer? So they trained her up, gave her support, sent her out on the street, and she absolutely has smashed it, to the point now where she's actually progressed to become a team leader. So this, and I'll give you a brief anecdotal example. She at one point was outperforming. She'd only been in the job 6 months. There were 77 enforcement officers at that point under the contract, and she was outperforming every single one of them within 6 months. And 6 months into the job, one of the managers in the contract had a cleaner phone in sick. So this manager decided to take Andra out of her uniform and put her back in cleaning for the day. So we had a conversation about that. Let's just leave it at that. So anyway, the days lost to sickness, as you can see there, we've got a lovely little graph to see. It drops down in 21-22. And then when we brought it in-house, the first year was under 2p, that dropped down again. And then in the first full year, post 2p, it's reduced by 53% by comparison, which is very good. This looks a little bit complicated, so forgive me, but this is an example of the Sunday performance. 52 PCNs issued on Sunday. Again, we don't target people, but we do monitor what's happening. We do like to see what's going on the street. In the pandemic, that dropped down, as you can probably understand, 14. Then it kicked up to 35, and then once it came in house, that was 52 again, and now it's 147. Important point here is Sunday doesn't feature. One of the incentives to get people to do a great job is to offer them overtime on a Sunday. So Sunday, nobody's rotated to do a Sunday. It's offered simply as an opportunity for people to earn overtime, but it's only offered to the top performers. So if you want to earn Sunday overtime, then you have to reach a certain threshold of performance in terms of your productivity. There's no target, but we select the top quartile of performers, and they get first refusal to do overtime, and many officers do. And lo and behold, because they're top performers, they tend to carry on that performance into Sundays, which is great news. So this chart will just demonstrate, as I mentioned already, about the verbal and physical attacks on enforcement officers. So back in 2020, verbal and minor abuse was 134 and 38 physical attacks. In 2021, that dropped down slightly, And then when we brought it in-house, we're doing dual patrols now, don't forget. It dropped down significantly. So that last year there was only 8 verbal and minor abuse attacks and only 6 physical and major abuse attacks. So it's really good. Still too many, but I think it's obvious to see there that compared to how it was in the old regime, the officers feel much more safer on street now they're deployed in pairs. So again, I think this is a repeat slide. So I'll skip through this. All right, so this is building on from the slides at the very beginning in terms of the measures and the costs. So you can see the average PCN is 101, then 18th in London in terms of quality. So again, just a footnote on that. Cases that the drivers dispute with us, that we disagree with them, eventually they go to an external and independent adjudicator for a final decision. And back in 2017, 2018, what this is telling you is that we were 18th in London out of 32 odd boroughs. So not a great performance in terms of quality. That's a real measure of quality. If all the cases that go to adjudicator are found in favour of the driver, then that indicates that Hackney, you're not doing a great job in making the right decisions in the first instance. So we're not getting things done right first time, and arguably we're not treating customers fairly. So again, the contractor cost, as you can see, jumped up to 5.8 million. And again, it continues to slide. In 2018, 2019, the overall PCN numbers continue to drop, and the quality, we dropped down to 23rd in London, yet the contractor cost was 5.7 million. So in 22, 23, that started to reverse. So the average PCNs issued, the productivity, as it were, is 118. We jumped to 3rd in London in terms of adjudication, which means we were getting things done right first time and treating customers fairly, which is really good. And then our in-house costs dropped by £500,000, which is what was the core of our business case that got this signed off. Then the following year, that we're on track now for 130. We're waiting for end of July, August, we get the latest adjudicator results for London. So they're imminent, and I won't say where I hope to be, but certainly better than 3rd. Let's just leave it that way. And then the annual cost is again £5.2 million. So this is evidence essentially that the insourcing project that we did was groundbreaking. They said it couldn't be done, but we did it. Now, staff turnover, as you've seen the slide already, was up to 31% in 2018, 2019, and it's now just 1.8% of the workforce. So it's a combination of things. It's not just because the pay has increased and they've got new job titles. It's a cultural shift. The way that they're treated fairly, they're given the right kit to do the job. Their safety has been taken seriously. Their working patterns have changed. You know, it's the best comparative role, if not in London, in the whole of the UK. And that's fundamentally why we've got such a low turnover in our workforce, and why also our productivity has, every month is practically a personal best. So a little bit of further information here. It wasn't just about the £500,000 savings by moving from contract to insourcing. What you see here is, sort of, apologies for all of these numbers here, but 21-22, we issued 81,500 PCNs on street. That generated an income roughly, although it's quite a specific figure here, £3.6 million. 22-23, that's broadly the same, in the same ballpark. 23-24, that started to increase. Now this year, and this is a real comparison between 21-22 was the last proper year where it was in the contract, and now it's come over to Hackney, and this is the first proper year we're doing full team, full operation in the new world. The productivity has jumped massively, and what that means for the organisation, or certainly for the service, is the income that's generated has jumped from, as you can see, 3.6 to 5.6. So there's a £2 million difference of additional income. Now, this wasn't in the business case because I couldn't be confident that we'd do any of this sort of stuff. All I said was we could do at least as good as the contractor, if not better. But if nothing else, we will be able to save £500,000. We can stop all this strike. We can reduce the staff turnover. We can bring these guys into our culture. But quietly, I was confident we'd be able to achieve quite a significant increase in income because of the way we manage these and lead these guys, and this is the evidence of that happening. So there you go. That's it for the slides. I'm going to stop sharing this now. So if there's any questions, I think we're going to need to be quick.
Thanks very much, Kevin.
I'm just half the time.
Just checking the chat just to see if we've got any questions in there. No, I can't see any at the moment. So anybody want to ask anything? Rebecca, I think you've got your hand up. or perhaps not. That might have just been a glitch on my screen.
I've got a few questions, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, sure, Jake.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks, Kevin. Really, really interesting. So I work for the North Essex Parking Partnership, and we run on-street and off-street operations for 6 different districts on behalf of Essex County Council. So it's a shared service. Really interested actually to hear that and see that, particularly at a time when a lot of councils are talking about outsourcing. It's quite refreshing to see something being brought in. First of all, are you open to visits, site visits? Because it'd be really great, I think, to actually come see some of that in person. Because there's definitely some challenges, I think, that you've picked up on and addressed, I think, within that work that are ongoing for us. And I think it'd be really, really helpful, I think, for us to perhaps learn from yourselves. You've gone through that change and seen some significant improvements there, which is great. That's ultimately, I think, what anyone wants. Just on top of that, quite interested to hear that the job description was changed.
Yeah.
So again, we'd quite like to see a copy of that, if that's okay. Again, sharing best practice. The sickness is what was the, so there's quite I think you alluded to it a little bit, but what's that equated to a per person metric? Because we looked at the total number of days under the private contractor, and then now, is that assuming that there's the number of enforcement officers overall hasn't changed, or has it reduced or increased? What is that a per person, I guess?
It's, I'm just trying to, well, we just look at purely days, well, the number of days lost to sickness by comparison. Yeah. I don't know if I mentioned this, I don't think I did, but essentially we're getting less for more. Under the contract there were 77 on-street officers. Yeah. By bringing it in-house, there's actually 54. So okay. We've seen productivity. So again, yourself now, if you're in the industry, you'll know that you don't target on PCNs, right? So in the old contract, 77 offers, they're generating, coming back with 3 PCNs they're issuing a day. So we've got 54 officers now. Yes, they're paid way more money, but we get value for money out of those guys, because right now they're generating 11 tickets a day. So they are super motivated. And again, part of the bit which we didn't cover in this presentation is the key to that is the management team or the leadership team. So in the old model, we had supervisors. They'd sit in the office, Jake, all day long, just looking at the GPS dots where the officers are. And that's it. Super passive, disengaged, talking to them with their, officer 135, go here, right? That's totally different. So when we designed we binned the supervisor role, we put in place a team leader role. You could argue it's the same thing. Well, it isn't the same thing, because front and center in that role is you must spend 80% of your time on street with your teams. That's it. So your job is to go out and observe, to coach, to feedback, motivate, inspire, do all that fun stuff. But it feeds into the behavioural piece that frames the whole of this service. So if you've got these behaviours and you've got those skills, and that's the sort of job you want to do, you will be successful. We will support you, and you will help to drive the performance in the right way without having the target. And we did go through a little bit of pain, because we had a lot of the old team in that old model that just assumed, and same with the officers as well, we just want to be assimilated into these roles. Well, you're not going to be assimilated into these roles, because they're distinctly different roles. You're not going to walk out of here on a Friday as a supervisor and walk in on a Monday as a team leader, because it is a different job. And getting them to understand that was quite a challenge, but they had to understand it, because without that, if we run the risk of, okay, well, let's assimilate you guys, so you walk in on Monday as a supervisor, or you're in a new enforcement job role, then what's going to be different? Nothing. So we're still going to get the same behaviors, the same practices, the poor practices, the same dysfunctional behavior, and the same underperformance. We're not going to sit back at the end and think, well, great, we're still getting 3 tickets a day. They're doing it. Well, they're not doing a great job. And when we benchmarked and we looked around mostly all London councils, we could see that the variation was all over the place, and we got a lot of feedback as to why the hell are you bringing it in house. But we were absolutely convinced that it's the right thing to do. But so, and the sick day piece. So again, the whole team has shrunk in terms of the numbers, but we're getting way more value for money for those guys. So of course, you know, the savings in terms of, well, we're employing less people, right? But the money that we've released, we're paying to the good guys that we've got that are absolutely smashing the performance. And as a result of that, they do feel valued. They don't want to go off sick because they know that they'll slump down the in the quartiles of performance, which means the opportunity to earn overtime is lost. And that, you know, that's a key driver. I don't want to go off sick. Well, not just because I lose the opportunity to do overtime, and that's an important factor, but actually, without being tongue in cheek here, they do enjoy working for us. They you know, if you care for people, they'll care back. I know it's a bit, you know, corny to say it that way, but it's true. It's a fact. So the key part again was around the leadership team, and being really firm about what we were looking for in terms of the skills, knowledge, but most importantly, the behaviours that we expect from those team leaders and the district managers that we have, all the way up to service manager and myself. That's what's unlocked the performance. And as I say, I mean, so again, absolutely happy for you to come down. If you drop me an email, then we can organise that. We can go into a little bit of detail with this, so you can see backstage some of the things. And if you've got more, you know, intricate, specific questions, then, you know, happy to spend a little bit of time showing you what we've done and sharing some of the metrics with you. And again, happy to share the JD that we have for the road and traffic enforcement officers, because it's important that to change the title of that job as well. They were CEOs before, everyone's got CEOs. But they have the same responsibilities, the same, you know, powers that are delegated to them, but the role is distinctly different and the title is different. Road and traffic enforcement officer, which is, again, it's really important to distinguish. CEO is an old thing that we don't do in Hackney anymore, and it's linked to the old contract. Contract's finished. That's the old word. We don't want to hear about that anymore. Road and traffic enforcement officers are what we have now. And, you know, some of the other things that we haven't touched on in this is around having a nuisance vehicle team and what we do around abandoned vehicles, blue badge fraud. There's, as you know, there's loads of stuff. It's not just about, you know, issuing tickets to people that haven't paid for a session. So yeah, I hope that's helped.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, thank you. I will definitely take you up on your offer of coming to visit. Yeah, I'd like to get into the detail of it.
Yeah, happy to do that. No worries.
Thanks very much, Jake. Mel, you've got a question.
Yeah, I was just going to say we're actually undertaking a full review of our services at the moment in Havering, because well, we're looking at what the best delivery model is ongoing for the next however number of years. In terms of coming to see you, would it be possible for us at Havering to join Jake and yourselves, and rather than go through it twice, we'd be really interested to come and see you, because we're sort of halfway through our review, I suppose. And like you, we've collected a lot of information and a lot of data, and it's all over the place. It doesn't give you I'm not expecting it to give us a definitive answer or anything like that, but there's so many different bits of data that we're collecting that it would be really, really helpful if we can sort of come and talk through some of the data that you've presented to us today, Kevin, and sort of have a look at, sort of, as Jake said, the job descriptions, how you're set up and all of that.
Absolutely, Mel. Yeah, I mean, yeah, more than welcome. And again, if we could happy to organise a date that's agreeable to all of us, and you know, yourself and Jake can come and meet with us, and myself and Michael, and we can go into some detail with you and show some of the stuff that we've been working on, and answer any of your questions. You know, we are, there's so much data in our business, and certainly in Hackney we do all sorts, and there's spreadsheets coming out of our ears half the time, and sometimes you can get you know, end up going down particular rabbit holes with certain things, and you end up getting a bit spun around with it. So yeah, so fundamentally, you know, if there are any questions around, you know, how we do deployment, what they do on street, how they work, that sort of stuff that's different from a contract model, it's a tricky one, really, in a way, because, you know, if I was listening to me, I'd be asking, well, this sounds too good to be true, what are the downsides? But there aren't. You know, since we moved away from the contracts model, there haven't been any downsides. It's just been benefit, 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 benefit. And there's still things that we can work on and do better. But you know, we've got some really good problems now, which is actually we've got a business case, as you know, what leads to what we've been doing now leads to questions around, okay, well, you've gone from 54 headcount to 77 headcount to 54. But actually, because these guys are so productive and it's consistent and it's real and it's sustainable, Well, actually, we've now got a business case to start increasing that headcount, right? Because the demand is there, and it does pay for itself, as you know, working in the industry. You know, if you've got an enforcement officer that's generating, or and trust me, in Hackney, if you know Hackney, people won't stop contravening in this borough, right? They will park and they will try and get away with it all day long, and we're here to catch them do it, not in a bad way. You know, as I say to the guys, it's not a glamorous world and stuff, but fundamentally, if drivers comply with the rules, there's nothing to enforce. But human nature is what it is, right? And drivers will take a chance. So, but the point is that the opportunity to do the right thing in terms of enforcing where necessary, particularly around residents. There aren't any, there are no leafy drives or front gardens and garages in Hackney. This is an inner London borough, housing multiplication. Our on-street space is very, very limited. So we have a duty to provide adequate parking under law, as you know, to our residents first. But there's limited street space. So when people come in and, if you go drive off to Asda's to, do your shopping or pick up your kids or whatever it is, in the old days in Hackney, then good luck trying to find a parking space when you come home and you drive around the block for 20 minutes trying to find somewhere to park the car. And that doesn't help the environment. So our job's really important, as you know, to make sure that if people do come in and park in a bay when they're not meant to be there, then there's a consequence for doing that, and you're going to get caught. Because if you're a resident and you've paid £150 a year for a permit, then you've got a reasonable expectation that when you come back from the swimming pool, wherever you've been, that you can pretty much park in your street. And that's fundamentally what I keep hammering home to officers. We're not here to catch drivers out necessarily. We're here to protect the needs of our residents and our businesses from people that, when I look at the stats, going back to the data point, particularly around moving traffic PCNs, and this is Michael's area because he generates a lot of this stuff, and he's our secret weapon in parking. When I look at the controversial LTN schemes, bus gates, moving traffic stuff, right? And if you look at, this is terrible, Hackney people don't want these LTNs, it's affecting the lives of residents. When you dig into the detail and you look at, okay, well, let's look at all of the PCNs issued in those schemes. What percentage of those are issued to vehicles that are registered outside Hackney? And this is where you get a bit of a mic drop moment, because in actual fact, 87% of those tickets are from people that are not registered in Hackney. So when you push, and that's evidence. So you give that to the politicians, give that to directors and anyone else that's sniffing around wanting to complain about what we're doing. We're here to protect those neighbourhoods and those people, because again, in Hackney, Havering's slightly different, all boroughs are slightly different. But fundamentally,
our demographics are different to that, but the issues are the same.
Absolutely. But you look at Hackney's, like 250,000 people live in Hackney, but only 30% of that population have got access to a car. So most of we've got to do a very important job, because most people here don't have a car, and their lives are blighted by people that drive in, park where the hell they want. Double parking's been an issue for a long time. That's pretty much eliminated now. But you take effective enforcement away from that, and the whole house of cards starts to crumble. You get complaints after complaint after complaint. Ward members constantly haranguing you. What are you going to do about this? I've got a complaint. A waste truck can't get through. The whole, operation of traffic and day-to-day life around the borough just starts to crumble. So it's super, super important what we do. But by all means, happy to welcome you to Hackney, and we can get into a bit of detail with any of the questions that you've got.
Thank you very much, Kevin. That's really good. And it's great to see Mel and Jake wanting to engage and learn more. So I'm afraid that's all we've got time for today, but thank you so much, Kevin, for a really excellent presentation. I hope everybody's enjoyed it. And as I said, this is one of a number of webinars that PPMA put on throughout the year, so do keep an eye out for the next one. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming today, and hopefully see you at another PPMA webinar one day soon. Bye, everybody.
Thank
you. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. Bye now. Bye.